Well, you're granted 2 sidewalks in places that are so nonsensical as being on the inside of a roundabout where it leads to nowhere but a circle. And no one's trying to walk in a small circle when going outside from its inside, unless you're standing here like me trying to ask why can't they put it in other places that are twice as dangerous. Whereas with sheets, when that predicts your ability to have any abilities, if you get a book thrown at you. There are very distinct shapes. Those that are circles and have spikes, they imitate a wave when it's collapsing between states. Between states is a distinct shape and is also a mention of time because it has action invocating the two. If you have action invocating the two, you have to include angular momentum, of course. Whereas a zigzag would have, from its front view, looking the same as just one line. Oh yes, perfect. This is just what I was mentioning. In a zigzag line, we can take into consideration that you don't know if this is a zigzag or a line, or until the plane is broken in a broken plane. Let alone these being caught in the mix, we're within the middle. This is a representation of a circle. It's hidden in the same discord of the angular momentum's plane unbroken. This has the extinction points of 4. These extinct points are not extinct yet, but they're very distinct in secluding the 90-degree angles. And you have 4 of them, and 4 times 9 is 36, but add the 0 at the end, now you've got a circle. And it's just uncanny that so many of these, there you go, is broad as daylight. If one was just like black and then the other one is not black, then that is a plane that is unbroken, whereas it's not as clear, but it could be clear as day. If the sky were on fire, this is all just a differentiation of a few elements, and that can be taken into consideration. It makes for the difference of burning or drowning. If you were put under water, you would be drowning. But if you were put under a liquid form of cyanide or sulfuric acid, well then you would be burning alive despite being under fluid. That's why the decay of concrete and you would be similar, is where you both would be crumbling under the chemical burning. Photo op with bees and animals. This is the photo op for short bus people. The exotic particles. Do you know the difference between a particle being a nutrient and then a particle being poisonous? The configuration of the table of elements. The best line, or 2 best lines in cinematics were the first one, Peter Parker. He would be saying, after fighting a villain that was substantially going to kill everyone, had a scratch on his face, God bless him. His teacher, when he got back to class, because he's trying to be low-key, asks, Peter, where'd you get your scratch? And then he says, I was clipped by a biker. The second quote, one of the best in cinematic history, was in Wizard of Oz. In Glenda, she sees Dorothy, this human, and she says, are you a good witch or a bad witch? In the particle zoo, or more generically in the animal kingdom, there's so many species that are known to be good and species that are known to be bad. Dolphins, they actually double as a species, which we think is good because they tend to save people. If there's ever sharks eating people, they're the ones who actually try to get in the middle of the tussle. A species which would be detrimental would be a mosquito, because they're living in order to cause harm, which is them feeding. So when the entire species is labeled good or bad, as accurate as it is, can't really be justifiable, because there's always one dark horse in the bunch, meaning the difference maker is on the individual basis and can't be subjected to the entire colony. Even when it comes to geese, if 1,000 of them bite you at the same time, there's one of them who would not be biting you because they would know it's not great for their entire species to look as such. You lunch meat on a slow brine. There are very distinct shapes. Those that are circles and have spikes, they imitate a wave when it's collapsing between states. Between states is a distinct shape, and is also a mention of time because it has action indicating the two. Similar dystrophies can be found in, well, what one would call a strip. The hot spot would be in Times Square, the Big Apple. This is a place where Wall Street resides and calculates numbers more than what a normal person could count in a lifetime. It's no wonder how many squares are kept, whereas in fact, that's how the justice system looks at different areas. They're called zones. A melting pot into what a flag is, stars and stripes. So a star and stripe, oh, there's one. So a star and stripe is something where there's two different things, and a melting pot is like what we were talking earlier, a mixed bag, or as something like concrete being looked at as a sheet, but it isn't really, unless you can understand the threading of every single coalescing of a concrete mix hardening, which is a really specific line, but it's hard to read because it's all enclosed, just like a sperm or an egg not being inside of a sheet, whereas within the duration of your entire life is justified from that one sperm and one egg going inside different sheetings, making up organs and brain tissue, all these tissues with the sheetings. And so with that one sperm and one egg that made you alive in the first place, that has a specific line that it probably isn't even alive anymore. And at the end of your times, it's probably going to be having a specific line where it didn't thrive at. And perhaps that is a justification where the solidification of concrete mixing would have a similar attribute if it started cracking, whereas all concrete, it doesn't stay together forever, but it's probably going to outlast most of the cells that you have if it's starting to crack before it crumbles. Or if everything gets flooded and is underwater, the concrete and you will have a similar dystrophy. So I think everything's made in sheets. All your organs can be thought as muscle tissue. The only thing that wasn't a sheet was the sperm and an egg. And for ever since then, everything's just been lining of muscle tissue into organs and sheets, and that makes up your reality. Whereas the difference of when the sheets start to leave is a disconfiguration, But as for the current state with the sheeting, how is it correlated to like a net or the web or a screen with things being put on it?